All right, so we're on mini lecture 3 right now. um, I've titled this the future profile of the supply chain manager. We've kind of laid out what it is, supply chain management is all about. We've talked about some of the skills that one needs to be successful in this discipline. And so now let's talk about where we are today and what skill sets I think are going to be important for you going forward as the as change is moving at an exponential rate. Uh, the scope of responsibilities is enlarging, and the skill sets necessary have to correspondingly enlarge as well. So let's spend just a few minutes on this. This is not a long one, but hopefully it kind of sets the tone for at least where I am on this. Okay, I think companies would probably look at this and not disagree with this. Is that the rapid technology changes and the rapid environmental changes, the marketplace changes. It's very difficult for supply chain personnel to keep up with that. Reality is most of us haven't been trained for it. We were trained for one kind of a market, and then all of a sudden we find ourselves in another kind of a market. And so it's necessary, we have to manage that even though we really haven't been trained in it. And so that's an enormous challenge, and from a marketplace standpoint. And the same is true from a technology standpoint. The rate of technology advances, the rate of how those affect how we may be doing our everyday jobs, such as new transportation technologies, for example, as well as other information technologies, are all going to change the way that we operate. And at the same time, they give us a huge opportunity to expand the supply chain, make better decisions, and provide more competitive advantage to our employers. We're still dealing, number 2.2, we're still dealing in an environment of multiple systems within the company. Many companies have not migrated to an ERP, and even if they have migrated to an ERP, they haven't migrated all the functionality that needs to exist into an ERP. An MRP, or an ERP, sorry, an ERP exists to a great extent for the internal data. They're not nearly as easy to work with when you're trying to integrate external data, because most of that data is unstructured, and ERPs don't like unstructured data. So somewhere in there, something has to give. But if we move down this path of transparency and visibility upwards and downstream, upstream and downstream, the need to understand the ability of the ERP to collect this data and manipulate this data is somewhat suspect. So that means there needs to be some piece of software or firmware somewhere in the middle of that to make those systems work the way that they were designed to work. That exists, but it's a strategy and it costs money. Number point 3, inventory. We're in one of those cycles where inventory to sales ratios are going back up to all-time highs. And when inventory to sales ratios go up, then the companies can't finance the inventory. You have the wrong items, so there's promotional opportunities. There's discounts, sales discounts. You have to get rid of that inventory in order to get down to the levels of the inventory that you really need to. And then you don't want to go back up. But right now, we're going through a cycle where global trade has declined dramatically. I mean, really dramatically. The consumer is not necessarily buying in all categories. They're buying in different categories. They're buying at different times. So there's been this accumulation of inventory in the pipeline now that is putting pressure on the financial situations of the companies. So inventory levels as a supply chain manager or person, inventory at the end of the day is really one of the key deliverables that you have. You have to really closely manage how's the best way to do this. You have to challenge the way that you have been doing it historically. You have to constantly review and do deep dives into the accuracy, track the metrics, and communicate to all the participants. We'll talk about this when we get into some of the demand planning side, which would be next week. I think that's what that will kind of bring it home for you. We need to do training. Our people need to be trained with new skill sets as they go into robotic warehouses, as they go into wearables. They need to have training to do that, and it's difficult to find the budget to do the training, but we have to do it in order to um, improve productivity. So this is a battle when we're in this tight situation that we're in right now. And we don't want to lose sight of price, but we don't want price to take back over in terms of we're only going to buy the lowest price, because the lowest price may come with risk. And it's critical that we look at total cost and not just price in order to optimize the supply chain and optimize the company's profitability. So there'll be pressure to go back to price um, as business tightens up, but it needs to be done in a situation where you're not taking on too much risk as a result of that. These are very difficult things, but they're very much out there right now, and this is what keeps people up. So what do we think the trends are? Well, the trends are there's going to be tracking of costs, accumulation of data will take place in more centralized hubs. We spoke about that in the previous segment. Procurement and logistics will be more centralized, but the execution will take place on a decentralized basis. There is a trend towards supplier management, supplier relationship management, which is basically you work with a smaller set of suppliers to the best of your ability, and you work with them on a longer term basis. And the whole idea is to be able to work with them to get that visibility, set up those standard processes that you need in order to get the visibility to manage what's going on with products that are external to your company. Outsourcing non-strategic items. This is the same concept. There's a matrix you call this. I can't think of the name of something law, but basically you don't spend time in procurement on things that are what we call MRO, which is repair, maintenance, and whatever, maintenance, repair, and something. You don't spend procurement time on that. Non-strategic items are left to the system. The systems these days, ERP systems, any reasonable planning system, MRP system will automatically generate an order for a non-strategic item. You can set the filter on whether you want it to make it a purchase item or if you want it to be an automatic replenishment type item. Certainly customer requirements. Customer requirements, as I mentioned before, are migrating from it's not how fast you get it to me, it's whether it's convenient for me to get it the way you want to get it. So I read this morning that Home Depot says 42% of their online orders are picked up in store, which is a remarkably high percentage, but that's convenient. Their customers like to go to the store. Actually, I can understand that. But that's one strategy. But just being able to say, okay, it's in the store, we've got it, we're reserving it, and we're holding it for you. So you're actually taking that unit off of an online order and holding it for that customer, even though some other customer may walk up on the bin right away and take it before it ever gets back to the customer service desk. So there's a lot of issues that go on meeting customer requirements, but right now in this market, there's nothing more important than giving the customer the experience that they expect. Maybe not deserve, but what they expect. And if you don't do that, all the research indicates that there will be a loss of that customer for a period of time, including forever. So all this ties back into better forecasting, better sales and operations planning, which was what we're going to talk about next week, and information sharing across the supply chain. So you can't take, in this market, you cannot take any aspect of the supply chain for granted. You can't take for granted that there's going to be ocean capacity, ocean vessel capacity to move your freight. Now, from Asia to the US or to Western Europe or wherever it is. Capacity is being reduced all over the world, whether it's trucks, whether it's ocean vehicles, whether it's rail cars. They're moving capacity off. You can't just accept it's going to be there. So this needs to be part of your sales and operations planning. Same thing with promotions. If you have an inventory issue, there's going to be some kind of promotional response to that. And from a demand planning standpoint, you have to know that. So again, all these factors that take place externally have to be brought into the planning process, which means people who generally or who may not be used to working together have to not only talk to one another, they have to sit around the table and decide on some basis what it is we're going to do for this particular item for this next planning time frame. And then we're going to commit the company to that. So these are enormous decisions. And the more SKUs you have, then the more complicated it gets. And we'll talk a little bit about that too, because there's some strategies around that. Again, we talked about cost just a minute ago, but I mean, just the pressure to reduce costs and to really demonstrate credible cost. So not just soft cost, not just avoidance, but true cost. And you don't want to do that at the expense of total cost, because then you move away, then you're basically suboptimizing. And it could come back and bite you depending upon what you do suboptimize, because if not everyone's aligned and on the same page, then your sales and operation plan could absolutely go up in smoke. The next to the last one here is basically continuing to raise the bar in skills and training. And we talked about that. I think that should be very clear. There's a constant need to upgrade our skill set and our training, and a big emphasis on certifications and training, whether it's community college training, whether it's this kind of stuff, night classes and online classes and so forth. There's a lot of capability out there. There's a lot of this out there, but it's something that companies need to really support in order to continue to be able to meet the challenge. We've talked about soft skills, so I'm not going to really, I don't want to read any of these to you, but basically there's a massive, there is an understanding that you have to have both hard and soft skills. And soft skills are the ones, are the ability to work with people, to manage your time, to be in a continuous learning environment, to really present yourself with confidence, and you got to think on your feet. And you have to be able to mentor and pass on knowledge, and you have to be somebody that people look to help facilitate, because in the supply chain, you're in the middle of a lot of this stuff. So you're the most natural person to really facilitate it. If you have sales and manufacturing going at each other, the one that's really the person to really mediate that is supply chain. But it's more than that. It's more than that. And that comes up next. So companies are becoming what we call customer centric. You've probably heard that term before. Customer centric is just what it stands for, but it's really demand chain management. It's demand plans. It's demand whatever. But the whole idea is that you're getting closer and closer to the customer, because you're getting more and more analytics in a very different time frame than you've ever looked at them, and you're looking at them in a very different time frame than just monthly. You're looking at them perhaps daily, weekly. You're constantly looking at how close you are to your forecast. You're looking at your trend lines, and you're looking for your exceptions, and you're trying to understand what happened, because you've already committed scarce resources to a certain plan that looks like it's not going to work out, or you need to divert resources into other items, or else that plan is not going to manifest itself either. And remember, a demand plan is tied directly to a financial plan. So that's why your finance guy is going to be very interested in what you come up with. So this is a very critical thing, which means you have to understand the market. You have to understand what's happening in the market, your markets, what's happening with your customers, what's sales saying, what are your customers saying. And this includes things like even returns. I mean, what's happening to returns? Maybe you're selling it, but maybe you're getting them all back. If you're getting back 20, 30% of an item, that's 20 to 30% of inventory you shouldn't have to build to begin with. So why? Again, managing relationships, we beat this up no more. You have to understand your price and focus on cost. So this is a pearl of wisdom, and we talked about that. The other thing is clearly you don't know when there's going to be a supply chain disruption. Classic case is the Hanjin ocean liner, where they declared bankruptcy, and all of a sudden there's 87 ships that can't be unloaded, can't even come to a port. So that's still going on, and the product that was waiting to go on the next sailings is still on the dock in South Korea. So that's a problem. That's a disruption. You don't plan for that, but you still have to work your way through it. So there's a lot of uncertainty here, a lot of disruption, and you have to be able to manage through change, which takes you perhaps out of your comfort zone. So here's the one that I really kind of wanted to highlight for you is this. Particularly since we are working more and more in a global environment, it's extremely important that we understand the legal issues and supplier and customer relationship management on a country-by-country basis for at least the critical suppliers and customers that you have. There may be things that we don't understand or that you don't understand about doing business in a certain country. Last week I heard about Russia, for example. Russia has a law that says that any information that goes through a Russian communication network may be brought in by the Internal Security Service and actually retained on servers for some future analysis. I don't think anybody knew that in the room. And there were 3,000 people in the room. So that was a very interesting thing to hear is if you use a Russian hosting service, every piece of information that you use in that Russian hosting service may be retained by the Internal Secret Service of Russia by law. So you might want to check into that because I wonder where else that happens. That's the first thing that comes to my mind. You do have to understand cross-cultural and global issues. Certainly business ethics vary by country. These are things you have to know. You've got to be up to speed on B2B business because B2B business right now is a $1 trillion business. We're not talking about e-commerce here. We're talking about business to business, B2B. It's basically the transaction values are over $1 trillion. E-procurement is a different way of doing things, which we'll talk about when we get to the procurement side. This could be auctions and reverse auctions and things like that. And then, of course, your finance. You've got to understand the finance, and I'll show you why in the next section when we move from the impact of inventory on the financial statements. So I think that's the last one for this. That's the last part of this I wanted to do. I'm going to say again to you guys, this has nothing to do with the cases. So I'm offering this up to you as just from an experiential standpoint, if you will, and to try to give you a base for where we are, where we're going, and what we need. So it's important if you don't really feel this is valuable to you, you need to let me know, and we can change direction if we need to. This is the first week, so this is what I think we should. I wanted to cover in the first week. The next section we're going to talk very briefly about the cases because there are PowerPoints for each of the cases that talk more about what to be looking for in these cases and defines what you need to do. So those will stand alone; those will be independent. But think about this. Let's go through next week. Let's see what you think, and if you're okay with it, then I am more than happy to share with you this type of information. Thanks for listening. So I'll be back with the case study. Oh, I'm not done. Sorry. Okay, tied back to the university. The biggest gaps that I see right now, and I think some of my colleagues see right now, is that people are coming out of the university without a good handle on the nuts and bolts of how supply chain and logistics are really executed. operationally, and are not coming out with a strong enough soft skill suite. Um, it Learning models is not what you're going to be doing in day one. Very, very unlikely you're going to be doing that. You may, but it's not likely you're going to be doing that. Most likely thing you're going to be doing is working in a plant or working in a warehouse. You have a managerial role there, or you have some kind of supervisory role or something. But when you look at the jobs that are out there, you're not going to see a lot of jobs for people that are being hired to do quantitative analysis. They're being hired to work with customers, to build customer relationships, to do metrics, to do things like that. Well, tracking metrics and putting data on the spreadsheet is not the job. The job is to translate those into an action plan. So you have to understand how those metrics fit into the rest of the business in order for it to work. And this is still a problem. These words are used interchangeably. They're used interchangeably in academia, and they're certainly used interchangeably in business. So this is an ongoing thing. And if you look at some of the jobs that are posted out there, you'll see that. But nonetheless, the companies will continue to partner with colleges because you're the source of the people they need. So it's our job within the college to make sure that you're prepared, and you're prepared with the skills you need, or at least the talking points that you need to get that job that you want. So it is mathematical, it is quantitative, but it's also these other things. And a lot of it is all about understanding how working with people, either cross-culturally or internally, and being able to defend your position and make things happen and make a difference. Okay, now I know we're done. Be back in a little bit.